Alright, welcome back. I'm Jimbo. I'm here with Graham, our
Hello, how are you?
vintage specialist. Brisbane.
Yeah, so coming up at the end of this week.
This week, yep. We got vintage playing for a Nethervoid or a Moat, depending on turnout.
Yep, that's right. So it just depends on how many players we get. Obviously, we'll prefer the mode.
What can we talk about in the format? Bans and restricted update happened at the end of August, 4 weeks ago.
That's right. And we had two changes. We had three changes even. That's right, Thorn as well. Yep. So Mentor was restricted to 1 copy, Thorn was restricted to 1 copy, and we unrestricted Yawgmoth's Bargain, so you're allowed to play 4 of those now.
Yeah, the shackles are off. So what does that mean? Is Bargain at 4 important?
I don't think you want to play more than 1 bargain anyway.
Sure.
In most cases, it's something that once you've got one out, another copy of the card isn't really going to do that much.
Yep.
So I don't think having extras is that relevant.
Okay.
There is a recent deck that showed up in one of the vintage tournaments which had a 4 bargain and 2 show and tell just to try and see if they could get it in as soon as they can. But I don't think it's going to be that relevant. It's just going to be... There are better draw engines like Paradoxical Outcome at the moment.
You don't want to draw extra copies of Bargain, and that's what Bargain does. It draws you more copies of itself, which is...
you can discard them later.
Look, there might be a list somewhere that runs 2, possibly 3, but 4 seems like a lot.
Yes.
I think this is going to be similar to Regrowth in that it was unrestricted. People are like, oh my god, and nothing happened.
Yeah, so people might try something up, but I don't think it's the threat.
All right, the restrictions then. Mentor at 1, Thorn at 1.
Yeah, so...
Mentor?
Let's start on Thorn.
All right, Thorn.
Thorn.
Shops, big bad of the format for the past 24 years.
Yeah, definitely, and they're just slowly restricting the pieces, and it's slowly working up ways to get past it, so... There's obviously that ever-growing thing of maybe we should restrict shops, you're never certain. I feel like I would have preferred Sphere to be restricted, if only because Thorn of Amethyst is where all the creature-based decks like to be, so Eldrazi, Merfolk, and all the Hate-Bear decks would prefer to be playing a Thorn over a Sphere, and it just means that it's a little bit better for shops and a little bit worse for the other decks.
Yep.
The thing is, shops can always just adapt, and so it's lost Thorns, and that means it might go back to playing Tanglewire again, it might go back to playing more threats, and it'll find a way to work around it.
Lastly, Mentor, down from 4 copies to 1.
Yeah, that's really, really good, I think. It means that we've now got a lot of the more, other blue decks are showing up again, so Samoth is showing up, Delver, and Landstill, and just having 4 Mentor in the format was very impressive, and it means that they're going to have a chance to see some variation in the blue decks that you're facing. I
mean, it was just such a nice, easy win condition that it was difficult to play other win conditions when you could just play Mentor instead.
Absolutely.
Which was one of the reasons that Splinter Twin was banned in Modern, was that you couldn't play a blue-red deck without Splinter Twin in it, because it was just a better deck if you played Splinter Twin.
Definitely. There were some people discussing just the concept of having a Reanimator deck and working out what the best target was, and the best target was Mentor rather than any of the normal threats, because it just won the game that much better.
All right, so what are you expecting the metagame to be like in Brisbane?
I think there will be... Vintage is strange in that paper, people don't move a lot on the deck, so there will be people who will be playing the deck that they've played for X amount of years, and you need to be wary that people may be playing a deck that's 4 or 5 years old. Meanwhile, there will be people who are up to date with the metagame, and they will be playing up-to-date shops, up-to-date Mentor, or Paradoxical Mentor, I should say, and something competitive.
I think if you are going to be playing shops, you can't play an out-of-date list because you're not allowed to. That's
this is true as well.
Problem. That one's changing every 6 months. But I'm definitely a victim of this. My card pool is limited. I'm stuck with big blue control decks for now. And other people are in the same situation, which is fine. Vintage is not the easiest to access format. It's amazing that we do have the community that we have in Australia. Managing to get multiple, 40-player events in a year now, which is
people are going to be travelling for them, which is good as well.
Alrighty, next up we have the rules changes that are coming in Ixalan. We've got 2 major rules changes. We have the Planeswalker Uniqueness rule change.
Yes.
This means that you are now allowed to have 2 different Jaces in play, 2 different Lilianas, 2 different Tezzerets, any other Planeswalker you feel like adventuring into.
Sounds good.
What does this mean for Vintage specifically?
Not a lot, I don't think. So I think that of the decks which could... there's one deck which runs more than one's Planeswalker of the same type, which is a big deck, and that would be Tezzerator.
Sure.
It's not really that much of a consideration, but it means that you can play Tezzeret the Seeker and Tezzeret Agent of Bolas.
Yep.
With that said, I don't think Tezzeret's a very good deck or a very well-placed deck,
Sure.
so I don't think that's going to have that much of an effect.
All right, then.
Some of the more traditional blue control decks can now play Jacevin's Prodigy and Jace the Mind Sculpt from the same deck. Yep. And I think that's going to be quite powerful whether it happens, but once again, there will be space concerns as to whether you can fit both of those in the same deck as well.
Yeah. The other rules change coming through is regarding Blood Moon and Humility and other cards that remove abilities from cards as a static effect. What it means is that if there's a Humility in play and there's a card that does something as it enters, say for instance True Name Nemesis, or if there's a Blood Moon and a card that does something as it enters, say a Dark Depths or a Cavern of Souls, these cards no longer do that thing. Dark Depths enters with no counters, Cavern of Souls enters with no creature type named, True Name Nemesis enters with no opponent named. What does this mean for the format?
Once again, I'm going to go with the not a lot answer. So with Humility, I don't think there's a deck that really wants to play it. The one deck that might look at playing it is Landstill, and it's just got better things it wants to be doing with its mana.
You've got to be big, blue, white, not playing creatures. It narrows it down quite a bit.
Yeah, and then with Blood Moon, it's not really a consideration for the format, and the lands that it's going to affect aren't going to do that much anyway. There are a few people who play Dragon Stomp, or the Mountains Win Again, as we call it in this format, and I think Blood Moon just does enough on its own, but the extra part isn't going to do a lot.
Sure, yeah. Alrighty, next we want to talk about some cards from Ixalan that might affect the format. Cool. What are you excited for?
So the big one is Sorcerer's Spyglass.
Okay.
So that is a 2-cost Pithing Needle. When it comes into play, you look at an opponent's hand, and it just gives you a little bit of extra information when you make your Pithing Needle choice. Yep. I think that's going to be really good in Eldrazi, really good in shops.
So I'm a little bit scared for an opponent going turn 1 on the play, Workshop, Spyglass, look in your hand. Oh, you're holding 2 Flooded Strands. Guess what I'm going to name?
Yeah. Oh wow, I didn't even think about the fetch land situation.
It's not as good a lock piece as previous ones, but previous ones keep disappearing from the shop's deck. So.
Yeah, no, it's just a better Pithing Needle in terms of the information that you get when you're casting it.
Yep.
And that's a big upside for the decks that would want to be doing that and can cast it on turn 1.
Cool. What else is there in Ixalan?
Sure, so Eternal-wise, the set's kind of weak. There is a card, Kapala, Warden of the Waves.
Okay.
There is a flex slot floating around in Merfolk, which sometimes goes towards Kira the Glass Spinner, and this is going to be very good in that slot. Essentially, it is that but one-sided rather than two-sided, so good for yourself. Charter Course, which is a 2-cost. If you're attacked with a creature this turn, draw 2 cards.
Yep.
That seems okay in Delver.
It is a sorcery, though.
It is a sorcery, which is a little bit annoying. But
I mean, it's got this attacking restriction on it anyway. You don't really want to cast it any time that isn't second main phase anyway.
Absolutely. Then there's a few cards which are kind of on the same level of hate cards that we've currently got, maybe a little bit weaker.
Yep.
So we have Ashes of the Abhorrent. It says that essentially
can't cast spells in graveyards.
That's right. So it's Grafdigger's Cage, except it's 1 and white, and it's on an enchantment, which means that it's a little bit harder for removal to remove. It doesn't stop the creatures from coming into play, though, and it doesn't stop triggered abilities.
Yeah, so it doesn't stop Narcomoeba, Bloodghast, Icarud. It also doesn't stop Oath of Druids, notably, comparing it directly to Grafdigger's Cage.
Yep.
Compared to Rest in Peace, I think the plus side is your Delve spells are still open. Is that right?
That's right.
Cool. Because you're not casting them from the graveyard, you're just reducing the cost. Seems a little bit worse than Rest in Peace, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
What else have we got?
We've got a Field of Ruin. So this is essentially a Relic of Progenitus. Okay. It's a 1-cost artifact which you can...
Sentinel Totem, sorry.
Sentinel Totem, thank you.
Field of Ruin comes later.
Definitely. Sentinel Totem, you sacrifice it, exile all graveyards and itself, and it also has an ability when it comes into play, you get to scry 1. I think the draw on Relic of Progenitus is better, but it's something to consider.
Yep. Field of Ruin, what is that one?
Field of Ruin. So Field of Ruin is essentially a Ghost Quarter.
Yep.
You can pay 2 and tap it to destroy target non-basic land, and then each player gets to search for a basic land card, so kind of a mirrored Ghost Quarter in that regard.
Yeah, so it's somewhere in between, like Tectonic Edge, Ghost Quarter.
The place where I like that card is in the White Trash deck, which plays Leon and Arbiter, so players can't search their library unless they pay 2, and it just, if the deck's already playing Ghost Quarter, then you can play this along with it and just bolster your own side and not your opponent's.
It's much worse because it costs 2 to activate. It also then means you can't search your own library without paying 2 as well, so that makes it 4 to activate if you want to get the full value.
This is true.
But like it can just be Ghost Quarter number 5 and 6, I guess.
Possibly.
Cool.
So we've got a couple of different equipment, which are... Vehicles, there you go, sorry. The new form of equipment.
Yeah.
Which do a little bit. There's one which is Fell Flagship. It's a 3/3 with crew 3. When it hits a player, you get to discard a card.
They get to discard.
They get to discard a card.
They have to discard a card.
Even better.
Ooh.
So kind of like Thought-Knots here did a lot to shops, just in that they have a little bit of extra interaction. Shops likes being able to interact even though it doesn't usually have that access to attack on. And then Sleek Schooner is a 4/3 for 3 with 1 to equip, but 2...
1 crew.
True, thank you. But
it's like reverse equipping, You're equipping your creatures to your ship. Or something, I don't know.
Right. But I think that's worse than the Fleet Wheel Cruiser that we've got running around at the moment.
Even Smuggler's Copter. It costs 1 less, it has 1 less power, but it flies. So.
And does a lot. And then the final cards are just the flip cards. So they've all got very powerful effects once they flip, but I think it's a few too many hoops for them to be jumping through in the most card. Even though we do have Gaia's Cradle and Black Lotus in the way there.
Yeah. All right. So you're going to Brisbane next week. What are you playing?
I think there's 2 places you would want to be. I think the first option is Paradoxical Mentor, which is still placed as one of the best decks in the format, even though it has had that restriction, so it's only got 1. It's still got a very, very powerful draw engine and allowed it to do some things.
I think outside of the card Monastery Mentor, it's just playing all of the best, most powerful things you can do. Paradoxical Outcome is insane. You get to bounce all your rocks and then draw a bunch of cards and play them all again. That's super powerful effects.
It is. And then the second one is just anything with the Null Rod in it. So some fish-based decks maybe, or maybe Landstill, for example, and just use your Null Rods to leverage your game plan, because that's going to be hitting Paradoxical Outcome decks when they can't use all of their rocks, and it's going to be hitting shops, and they're 2 of the big threats in the format at the moment.
Great. Is there any decks you wouldn't recommend playing this week in Vintage?
I wouldn't recommend Dredge at the moment.
Okay.
I don't like it mainly because shops, with how it's built at the moment, has 4 Ravager, it has 4 Walking Ballista, and it can just destroy bridges from the other side of the board at any time it needs. And it's a big enough consideration that it just makes the deck weaker. I also wouldn't try and rebuild a Prison Shops deck. They've just had too much taken out of the deck than what they had.
Yeah, every 3 months is just another piece disappearing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's your hot takes on Vintage. We'll see you in Brisbane. Thanks, Graham.
Thanks for having me.